A shocking betrayal that ruined my family, finances, and peace of mind. My stepbrother secretly recorded my therapy sessions, manipulated my bank, and destroyed my reputation until I uncovered proof he didn't know I had. Watch how I revealed everything live on TV and took back my life in this emotional, true, and heartbreaking story. The night everything collapsed, I was standing in the middle of my mother's backyard, holding a half-eaten fast food burger that tasted like ash in my mouth, while Liam, my 22-year-old stepbrother, told the crowd that I'd lied in court to steal a child. Everyone turned toward me. Phones lifted. Flashes went off. And I swear, the smell of burnt rubber from the nearby street mixed with the cheap cologne Liam always wore, the one I used to buy him on his birthdays, made me gag. It was 3:47 a.m. when I finally drove home that night, headlights cutting through the fog like a blade. The text messages kept coming, strangers calling me saying I'd destroyed a family. By morning, my $67 phone bill had turned into something more than just a charge. It was the number burned into my memory from every threatening call I got for weeks. But let me back up. 2 months earlier, I still thought Liam was family. I thought he cared about me, about my daughter, Emma. She's 6, bright, wild, full of questions I never seemed to have enough answers for. The custody battle had already drained me emotionally, financially, spiritually, but at least I had Mom and Liam. Or so I thought. When my father died back in 2019, Mom remarried fast. Liam came as part of that deal, a lost-looking college kid with too much trauma and a talent for turning sympathy into control. He's like a son to me, Mom would say. Help him get on his feet, John. So I did. I hired him part-time at the garage I co-owned. I lent him my old Toyota. Hell, I even gave him Dad's watch once, temporarily, when he said he needed to look professional for a job interview. That watch was the only thing I had left that smelled faintly like my father's aftershave, like metal and faded tobacco. It came back scratched, late, and smelling of cheap beer. The first red flag came during the pandemic. Liam had accidentally told my ex-wife's lawyer about an old argument we'd had, one I'd baked in to keep private. I just thought she should know you were under a lot of stress, he said. I brushed it off. Everyone was stressed then. We were all trying to survive lockdown, loneliness, and unpaid bills. But then, he started helping more than I asked. He offered to file paperwork for my custody hearings, because I'm good with bureaucracy. He handled my bank appointments, even helped me negotiate payment extensions. It felt generous until I realised he'd convinced Mom to co-sign one of my loans without telling me. Mom defended him. He's just trying to help you stay organised, she said. By July of last year, I was running on fumes. I'd been fighting my ex-wife, Alison, for shared custody of Emma after she accused me of being unstable. A lie she built out of panic attacks I couldn't hide. The truth is, I was already in therapy by then, diagnosed with complex PTSD after years of emotional from my father. But I was making progress. My therapist, Dr. Navarro, kept reminding me that healing isn't linear. Then Liam started showing up at my sessions. Not inside, just waiting outside the clinic, leaning against his car, waving. They're just checking in, big bro, he'd say with that smirk. It was weird, but Mom thought it was sweet that he cared. The night before my birthday, Mom said she wanted to throw a small party to just family and close friends. I was hesitant, but she insisted. You deserve a celebration, John, you've been through enough. The next evening, the backyard was filled with the smell of grilled burgers and laughter. String lights hung between trees, swaying in the wind. For a moment, I almost forgot the court dates, the sleepless nights, the online gossip. I remember looking at Liam, joking with Emma, and thinking maybe he's growing up. Then, around midnight, he stood up, drink in hand, and said he had a toast. His voice carried through the yard. To John, he began. A man who fights for what he wants, even if it means lying to everyone he loves. The laughter faded. He went on about court manipulation, about covering up anger issues. And somehow, he had documents. Screenshots. Even audio clips of my voice, taken from therapy sessions. My hands went cold. Where did you get that? I whispered. He smiled. You shouldn't leave your laptop unlocked, bro. That's when I realised he'd been recording me. Watching me. Stealing from me. And it was just the beginning. The days after that birthday party were a blur of disbelief and humiliation. Every time I replayed Liam's words in my head, you shouldn't leave your laptop unlocked, bro, my stomach turned. I couldn't eat. Even the thought of food made me nauseous, though I remember forcing down a fast food burger one night because Anna begged me to eat something, Daddy. It was cold and soggy, but she smiled as I took a bite, so I pretended it tasted fine. By the next morning, clips from that toast had made it online. Someone, and probably Liam, had uploaded snippets of my therapy recordings, edited to make it sound like I admitted to hitting someone. It was a lie, but context didn't matter. Within hours, my inbox filled with messages calling me a monster, a liar, a danger to my child. One message read, you should lose custody forever. Another said, we know where you live. My address was in the comments. When I confronted Mom, she was shaking. Liam said he threatened him, she said. He told me you were unstable, John, that you broke things. I didn't, I said, but my voice cracked. He's twisting everything. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the moment I felt the first real fracture, the kind that doesn't heal cleanly. I spent the next week calling my lawyer, trying to get the post removed, but screenshots spread faster than damage control. I even filed a police report, but they said it was a family dispute and not a criminal matter. During the pandemic, I used to believe that isolation could drive people mad. I saw it happen in others of fear, mistrust, loneliness. But I never thought I'd see it weaponized against me. Liam knew every crack in my armor, my diagnosis, my therapy notes, the night I called Dr. Navarro at 2 a.m. because I couldn't breathe through a panic attack. He had access to my computer because he used to help manage my documents for court. And somehow, the bank started acting strange too. One afternoon, I logged in and found a $3,200 withdrawal I didn't make. I called the bank immediately, furious. The manager, Mark Caldwell, a man I'd known since high school, said, "John, you authorized that last week. Remember, you came in with your stepbrother." I felt my blood run cold. "No, I didn't." He hesitated. "Well, your signature's on the form." I drove straight there, heart pounding. When I saw the paperwork, my name was indeed signed, but it wasn't my handwriting. Liam had forged it. Mark shifted uncomfortably, saying, "Look, he said you were having issues, that you wanted him to handle things for you." "Mark," I said, my voice low. "You know me, you know I wouldn't do that." He looked away. "I didn't want to get involved, man." That was the second betrayal. A few days later, a co-worker, Jen, pulled me aside at the garage. She was pale, eyes darting toward the cameras by the break room. "I shouldn't even say this," she whispered, "but Liam's been talking to people. He's telling them you're about to get arrested. He said that's proof he stole money from the business." My knees went weak. "What? That's insane." "He showed someone an email," she said. "But it looked edited. I thought you should know." I thanked her, but it was already too late. The rumor spread. Customers started cancelling appointments, and our business partner asked me to take some time off until things settled down. At home, Emma's laughter was the only thing that kept me anchored. But even she started sensing something was wrong. One night, she asked, "Why are people mad at you, Daddy?" I told her, sometimes people believe things that aren't true. I tried to sound calm, but inside, I was falling apart. Sleep became impossible. I'd wake up drenched in sweat from nightmares, Liam standing in my house, whispering that he earned everything I had. My hands would shake uncontrollably. I kept seeing flashes of my father's face, that same disappointment, that same fear. Dr. Navarro said I was experiencing trauma reactivation, that my nervous system had gone into constant alarm mode. "John," she said during one session, "you're being gaslit on multiple levels. This isn't just manipulation, it's psychological warfare." But therapy couldn't fix the damage to my reputation. I started getting stares at the grocery store. People whispered. Emma's school principal even called to check in, hinting that a parent had raised concern about her safety. One night, I got home and saw tire marks in front of my driveway, fresh ones. The smell of burnt rubber filled the air. My mailbox had been ripped open, papers scattered. When I looked closer, I found a note. "Stop lying, we're watching you." My knees buckled. For the first time, I realized Liam wasn't just trying to ruin me, he was trying to erase me. And I still didn't know how deep it went. I wasn't supposed to find it. It was late, around 2:13 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. The panic attacks had returned with a vengeance. Emma was asleep on the couch, a small stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. I sat at my desk, staring at my father's watch, the one Liam had returned months ago, scratched and reeking of cheap beer, and suddenly I remembered the old laptop he'd borrowed during court prep. Something in me whispered, "Check it." I powered it on. The login screen flashed, and my heart began pounding. Liam had obviously disabled my password. But a simple trick, one I learned during one of my therapy sessions when we practiced grounding techniques, let me bypass it. What I saw next made me freeze. Folders. Hundreds of them. Each labelled with dates, therapy sessions, custody hearings, even private moments in my own home. Hidden inside were video files, recordings of me private, vulnerable, unguarded. Liam had been filming me for months, maybe years. He had audio from my therapy calls, screenshots of my bank passwords, clips of me arguing over Em's custody. Everything he needed to manipulate me, ruin my reputation, and destroy my finances was here. My hands trembled as I clicked one of the files. There I was, on the couch, talking to Dr. Navarro about a panic attack I'd had at 3:47 a.m. 3 nights prior. My voice shook. I can't breathe, it feels like I'm drowning, I can't. I winced, hearing myself. Liam had taken this, edited it, and presented it as if I were violent and unstable. The sickest part? He'd blackmailed me in advance, warning that if I ever told Mom or the authorities, he'd release even more. That's why he'd been charming, helpful, and seemingly supportive. He was always in control. But there was more. Emails from the bank manager, Mark Caldwell, popped up. It turned out he'd been complicit the entire time. He wasn't just covering a withdrawal. He had been helping Liam access my accounts, forge signatures, and even apply for a credit line in my name. My savings had drained. My reputation shredded. And the strange part? I wasn't the only victim. There were hints of other clients, other families, all subtly manipulated to make them dependent on Liam's help. I called Jen immediately. "You were right. He's been recording me. And Mark, the bank is worse than we thought." "I tried to tell you," she whispered. "I told you weeks ago, but I didn't know how bad it was." I felt the weight of betrayal like a physical blow. Not just from Liam, not just from Mark, but Mom too. Every time I looked at her, I saw the trust that had once been my anchor, now fractured. She hadn't intentionally sided with him, or maybe she had, in ignorance, but her belief in his good intentions had let this go on. Social media had already amplified the disaster. The clips Liam released had gone viral within hours. Strangers sent me messages threatening my life. Parents whispered in Emma's school. At work, customers avoided me. Some former friends unfriended me. My isolation wasn't just emotional anymore, it was physical. And inside, the trauma symptoms I'd worked so hard to control resurfaced violently. Panic attacks at random hours, nightmares where Liam's face morphed into a dark shadow over me and Emma, and trust issues so severe I couldn't even leave the house without hyper-awareness. Complex PTSD isn't subtle. It rewires your brain. It makes your own memories feel like traps. I remembered Dr. Navarro's voice. You're not weak, John. You've been gaslit, manipulated, and betrayed. Healing isn't forgetting, it's reclaiming control. I started saving every file Liam hadn't noticed, recordings he didn't know I had. Emails, voice memos, screenshots, a digital arsenal. I wasn't going down without a fight. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for Emma, for my reputation, and for the memory of my father whose watch I still clutched like a lifeline. Even in my terror, a cold clarity emerged. Liam had underestimated me. He thought I was broken, pliable. But now I saw everything: the manipulation, the betrayal, the psychological warfare. And I realized that I had the evidence to turn it all around. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed at the desk, hands shaking, scrolling through files, feeling both terrified and empowered. This was bigger than a family dispute. It was systematic, meticulously planned, and personally devastating, but now I was the one holding the cards. I whispered to myself of more than I thought, you won't get away with this, not anymore. Little did Liam know the revenge, the lawsuits, and the public humiliation were just beginning. The morning of the broadcast, I couldn't eat. My hand shook as I scrolled through Liam's files one last time, clutching Dad's old watch like it was the only piece of protection left in the world. Emma was at school, blissfully unaware, and I envied her peace. The TV studio had set up for a live segment on family betrayals in the digital age. They didn't know the full story, but I did. I had everything: video recordings, emails, bank documents, and screenshots proving every manipulation, every theft, every calculated lie Liam had engineered. When I walked on set, the lights were blinding, the smell of burnt rubber still lingering faintly outside from the nearby street construction. My stomach churned, my palms sweaty, but the anger inside me made my legs feel solid, unshakable. The host smiled. John, thank you for being here. Can you tell us what's happening in your family? I took a deep breath. This isn't just a family dispute, I said, my voice low but steady. This is manipulation, theft, and abuse. My stepbrother Liam has been systematically ruining my life for months, recording me in private moments, forging my signature, and even working with my bank manager to access my accounts without my consent. The camera zoomed in, and I hit play on one of the clips. The screen behind me flickered to a video of Liam speaking to a lawyer, casually talking about how he planned to ruin me financially while presenting himself as my helper. The host gasped. This is shocking. I have proof, I continued. Audio recordings, screenshots, emails, everything, and I'm releasing them because this cannot continue. He has blackmailed me, threatened my life, and ruined my relationship with my daughter, but it ends now. Suddenly, Liam appeared in the studio audience, smug as ever. Hey John, come on, he sneered. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Everyone's going to think you're crazy. I turned to him, feeling a clarity I hadn't felt in months. You underestimated me, I said, my voice trembling with controlled rage. But I kept copies you didn't know existed. I held up a USB stick. Every lie you told, every manipulation you did is here, and it's going straight to the authorities, lawyers, and social media, public humiliation included. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. His smirk faltered. The host looked stunned. Are you saying he's responsible for all of this? Yes, I said, my throat tight. And the person who should have been protecting me, my mother, was misled, but the damage is done. My daughter deserves better, I deserve better, and now the world will see the truth. At that moment, security escorted Liam out. He tried to argue, tried to claim it was defamation, but the evidence was irrefutable. Every recording, every email, every forged document, it was all catalogued and timestamped. Authorities intervened immediately, taking statements and securing the files. I slumped into the chair, exhausted, adrenaline coursing through me like fire. The host put a hand on my shoulder. John, you were brave. This is incredible. I nodded, but inside, I felt a mix of relief and emptiness. Months of panic attacks, nightmares, and mistrust had led to this moment. I had shown the world the truth, but I still had to rebuild the pieces of my life Liam had shattered. After the broadcast, the fallout was instantaneous. Strangers who had been threatening me online suddenly disappeared. Friends reached out with support. The local news picked up the story. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. But even as I celebrated small victories, I couldn't forget the psychological scars. Complex PTSD doesn't vanish overnight. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the distrust, they remained. Therapy sessions became more intensive, focusing on grounding techniques and slowly restoring my sense of safety. Still, for the first time in years, I felt agency. I had taken control. I had fought back, not with rage alone, but with evidence, strategy, and courage. Liam's manipulation of the recordings, the blackmail, the theft had ended. And for the first time in a long time, I thought about the future of my daughter, my life, and the possibility that I could rebuild. The victory on live TV didn't feel like victory for long. The adrenaline faded, leaving only exhaustion, guilt, and an annoying sense of emptiness. Even though Liam had been arrested and authorities were investigating, my life felt hollow. Emma still smiled, but I could see the anxiety in her little eyes. She knew something had changed. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, my father's watch cold against my wrist, the faint smell of burnt rubber still lingering from the old construction outside. I couldn't stop reliving the moments of betrayal, the way Liam had smiled while ruining me, the way Mark Caldwell had turned a blind eye. Each memory felt like a blow. Panic attacks returned with a vengeance. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and I woke screaming at 3:47 a.m., drenched in sweat. Therapy sessions with Dr. Navarro became the only place I felt safe. She reminded me constantly, "This isn't weakness. John, you survived psychological warfare, now we rebuild." We worked on grounding techniques, confronting triggers, and slowly dismantling the fear that had taken over my body. But the trust issues ran deep. I couldn't leave the house without hyper-awareness. I refused phone calls from anyone unfamiliar, and social interactions felt like walking on a minefield. The public fallout made everything worse. Social media was merciless. Even after Liam's arrest, people whispered, speculated, and questioned my motives. Strangers sent me death threats and messages like, "You'll pay for this, John, or we know where you live." I had to change my numbers multiple times. My $67 phone bill became irrelevant compared to the barrage of harassment. At work, the whispers didn't stop. Colleagues avoided me, suspicious eyes followed me, and some clients cancelled appointments, unwilling to get involved in a family scandal. Even Jen, the coworker who had warned me too late, apologised but couldn't make the tension disappear. My garage, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. Mom was broken too. She didn't know how to apologise for believing Liam, for letting him manipulate her into siding with him in small ways. We tried to repair our relationship, but the cracks ran deep. Every conversation reminded me that trust is fragile, and once shattered, it doesn't return easily. Financially, I hit rock bottom. The theft, forged loans, and ruined reputation left me with barely enough to cover rent. I lived off old fast food burgers and coffee, my health deteriorating. I remember one night lying on the couch, Emma asleep beside me, staring at Dad's watch and thinking, how did it come to this? I felt like a failure not just as a father, but as a human being. The trauma symptoms were relentless. Nightmares featured Liam's face looming over me, blackmailing me, controlling my life. Every time the phone rang, I jumped, expecting threats. I became hypervigilant, constantly scanning for danger. Dr. Navarro called it trauma wiring and my nervous system stuck in survival mode. Even mundane tasks like grocery shopping or walking Emma to school became exercises in anxiety management. Sleep was rare. I remember lying awake for nights, reliving the moment Liam revealed my therapy recordings online. The shame was suffocating. I questioned everything in my judgment, my morality, even my love for Emma. It felt like my identity had been stolen. I reached out to support groups for people who had experienced complex PTSD, betrayal, and familial manipulation. It helped a little, just knowing others had survived similar horrors. But the stigma lingered. Friends, colleagues, and neighbours had all witnessed the public spectacle. They didn't know the full story, and their judgment felt inescapable. Even simple joys felt muted. Fast food burgers, once a guilty pleasure, tasted like ash. The little victories, Emma's laughter, a kind word from a friend, were overshadowed by lingering dread. Every time I tried to rebuild, a memory of betrayal haunted me, reminding me that safety and trust are illusions. By the end of that dark stretch, I realised one undeniable truth: surviving Liam's manipulation wasn't enough. I needed to reclaim my life, my autonomy, my self-worth. Therapy, grounding, and evidence weren't enough. I had to redefine myself from the ground up. I know I couldn't see it yet. That realisation marked the faintest glimmer of hope. Because after rock bottom, the only direction left was up. Rebuilding my life felt impossible at first. I still carried the weight of betrayal, panic attacks, and public shame, but I knew I couldn't stay paralysed forever. The first step was therapy, not casual sessions, but intensive, twice-weekly sessions with Dr. Navarro. Together, we dissected every trauma trigger: Liam's manipulation, the bank's betrayal, the social humiliation, even the threats from strangers online. She reminded me that healing wasn't forgetting, it was reclaiming control over my mind, my emotions, and my choices. I started small. Mornings became sacred. I would make coffee, eat a cold fast food burger while watching the sunrise, and journal everything I felt. My handwriting was messy, shaky, but I didn't care. This was mine. I learned to ground myself in the present, the smell of coffee, the sunlight on my face, the steady ticking of Dad's watch on my wrist. I was beginning to reclaim my sense of safety. Once I felt a bit stronger, I confronted the financial mess. I sued Mark Caldwell and the bank for collusion and forgery. I filed every piece of evidence I had against Liam, ensuring the court could see the full extent of their crimes. Watching their expressions in the courtroom, shock, disbelief, the smugness wiped off their faces, was a form of catharsis. I wasn't just fighting back, I was reclaiming my life. The next step was social restoration. I reconnected with Jen, my coworkers, and a few trusted friends. Slowly, I rebuilt relationships, but this time, I set boundaries. I refused anyone who attempted to manipulate me again. Social media was tricky. I deleted old accounts, created a private one for updates, and refused to engage with anyone spreading rumors. The constant fear of judgment began to ease, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without panic. Travel became my therapy. I booked a one-way ticket to Thailand, then to Greece, then Morocco. Each country brought something different. In Thailand, I learned to meditate in temples, letting the sound of chanting drown out my inner chaos. In Greece, I walked along the cliffs of Santorini, watching the waves crash, realizing that life could be both fast and beautiful, and my trauma didn't have to define me. In Morocco, I bartered at markets, laughed with strangers, and discovered a sense of freedom I hadn't felt since childhood. During these travels, I kept a journal and video login not for anyone else, but for me. I recorded the sunsets, my thoughts, my progress, and my reflections on what I had endured. Slowly, my nightmares lessened. The panic attacks, though still present occasionally, became manageable. I began to trust myself again, my decisions, and even the world around me. I also began volunteering for organizations helping victims of domestic and financial abuse. Sharing my story carefully, with boundaries, allowed me to transform trauma into purpose. I realized that my suffering, though deeply personal, could help others reclaim their lives. Every person I helped reminded me that my journey wasn't in vain. By the time I returned home, I felt a quiet, unshakable strength. Liam had been convicted, Mark Caldwell faced professional consequences, Mom and I had begun repairing our fractured trust. Emma's laughter was no longer shadowed by anxiety, and for the first time, I could watch her grow without a constant sense of dread. I kept Dad's watch, a symbol of continuity, memory, and survival. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the darkness I had endured and the power I now had to shape my own life. I still had scars, both visible and invisible, but scars are reminders of survival, not shame. Ultimately, the journey taught me that healing isn't linear. I had to confront betrayal, expose manipulation, endure social isolation, and face financial ruin. But in the end, I discovered resilience, courage, and self-worth. I had rebuilt my life on my terms, traveled the world, and learned that even after the deepest trauma, inner strength can prevail. I am not defined by Liam's lies, by the blackmail, by the panic attacks or the threats. I am defined by the choices I made afterward to fight, to heal, to grow, and to reclaim every part of myself. And in that I found